Hey there, welcome back to Author Journey. My name is CJ Anaya. Today we're going to talk about a question that I got in an email. Kathy asked me how an author deals with criticism, especially if it's negative, and also how to tell whether it's something that really should be applied to your book. Because when you receive criticism either from fans, from reviewers, from beta readers, from editors, how do you know whether that's something you should implement or not? So, excuse me, first of all, good question. I think as authors, we all struggle with this. Second, I feel like any advice I give you, it can't be like a hard, fast rule, because everybody's books are going to be different, and those opinions that are given to you are going to be different. Reviews and criticism, it's all so subjective. And I need you to get that into your head. When you're looking at reviews from people or criticism, I need you to put on not just your author hat, but also your business hat, and recognize that if you are trying to run a business where you're making a living from your writing, you have to understand your audience. You have to understand your readership. You have to understand what will be accepted well within that genre and within that readership. And so it's almost like you're surveying your audience in a sense when you receive those reviews, when you give your books to your beta readers. And some authors absolutely refuse to take a look at reviews, which is fine. They're going to receive that constructive criticism in other ways. They're going to get it from their editors and their beta readers, and that's fine too. But the same principle applies. Either way you look at it, you have to recognize that if you put this out to sell, and people aren't buying it, or people are having bad reactions to it, then from a business perspective, you need to say why. What need did I not fulfill, in a sense, when it came to entertaining them? What aspects of this book are not appealing to them? And are those reasons really valid on the grand scheme of things? Like, are you having enough complaints about one particular thing to where that makes sense? Picking and choosing. So I'm going to give you advice, but recognize that everybody is different. And I'm also going to be a little vulnerable here and pull up a 1-star review that I recently got for the very last book in the Healer series. Now, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on it. And so I read through this, and I do read through my reviews, which can be a rough thing, especially if the reviews are kind of hate-filled. If there's like, but I feel like I need to understand my readership. I need to understand my audience. I need to know what is happening. And also, sometimes reviewers aren't just being mean to be mean. Reviewers are giving constructive criticism, and it's an honest opinion that is based off of good reflection. And so that constructive criticism is helpful. So this particular reviewer had a problem with the prophecy, in the sense that I had focused so much on Hope and Ty's relationship, and she felt like I didn't focus on them enough in the very last book. She felt like I was spending too much time introducing Angie and the possibility of people loving her to basically to have an opportunity to do a follow-up series, do a companion series with Angie being the lead. And she's right, and I did do that. One of the reasons why I did that was because Angie needed to develop a little bit more. Another reason why I did that is because I know my readership, and I know how much everybody loves Angie. This particular person hated Angie. And I haven't had enough people come to me and say, hey, I hated Angie, for me to change any of that. So this is her opinion, and it's valid. There's nothing, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, I can't believe you hated Angie. Plenty of people are either going to love her snarky attitude and the way that she comments and interacts with people, and other people aren't. It's just, this is a personality thing. Personalities are going to rub you wrong. So I wasn't too worried about that, or the fact that she didn't like Angie and didn't like to focus on it. I know enough of my readership loves Angie that they actually really liked that part. But what she said, but the one thing that she said that I really actually appreciated was that she wanted to read about, and I'll read it right here. I'm going to highlight it. All I wanted was to read about the actual main couple, and there were so few moments of them together. And when they were together, it was rushed with no flirting or good dialogue. I think that's a valid point. And I'm looking back and I'm thinking about the book, and they did have very good moments in the beginning, which she she said the first chapter had everything she wanted. There was just so much conflict involved and so many people involved. I really did not give them as many scenes as they could have had as I reflect and go back on it. And so I think to myself, so how making this a win, because I do think that constructive criticism is valid. I like that. And I like that she said that. I've never had anybody complain about that. So I think that there were enough people who got enough out of it. But for her, it was all about hope and Ty. And I was focused a lot on the conflict and what was happening and her healing the veil, and maybe didn't pay enough attention to the romantic aspect of that once they were together, continuing to develop their characters. So how could I fix this? And do I feel like it's important enough to fix it? Are there enough people who have a problem with this? I've never had anybody mention that before. And I have tons of beta readers and my editors catch a lot of things, but this is clearly a personal opinion that I think is valid, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm really intrigued with the idea of going back and developing a few more scenes and having a little more focus on what she was describing. Now, here's the thing about that. You need to pick and choose what you feel is good and what resonates with you. I liked that. I thought that was a really good point that she made. And I would like to explore it further. And the great thing about self-publishing is that you can add scenes to a book, and you can notify your readers that you've done that. And if they can't automatically get that updated version from Amazon or wherever they purchased it, you can just insert it into your newsletter, which is another reason why it's great to have a newsletter. You can say, hey there, for all of you who've already bought the book, or for all of you who've already read it, I've decided to add a few scenes in here that I think you would enjoy, and you can put them in there and let them know where they were placed in the book. Offer up, a complimentary version of that book for anyone who had already bought it. And maybe some people will be dishonest with you and say, oh, I already bought it, and they really didn't. I mean, to me, it's not a big deal. If they're on my newsletter, I don't have a problem giving out free books. But this is an intriguing idea, and I would like to go back to it eventually and possibly add a few more scenes where there is more dialogue and a deeper connection between Hope and Ty. Instead of there was just a lot of action. There were a lot of things that needed to be accomplished. So I find that interesting. She also had a problem with how everything wrapped up nicely at the end. She didn't like that nobody died in the end, even though Kirby dies, but he's brought back. So what did she say? She said, no one died in the past and no one dies now because they were given life back. The unloving mother is suddenly loving. The warrior who lost his soulmate is suddenly without pain or complaints, okay with that, and starts pining for annoying Angie and acting like Hope was never his love interest. Every past life is way too conveniently present in this life. It is literally too good to be true and therefore way, way too unrealistic. Okay, so she has a problem with the fact that my characters all were resurrected and came back into these lives. I don't have a problem with it because they were all central to helping Hope heal the veil. So for me, that's how I distinguish it. That's how I sit there and go, it's really important that all of these people who were involved in her life in her first life are involved in her life in this resurrected one. So they all needed to be a part of it. And I think maybe her main hang-up was that Kirby didn't die, but it was important for Kirby not to die, really. It was important for him to be saved every time, because that's the real issue for Hope, is that, is she going to abuse her power and try to heal him? Or is she going to finally recognize that there are just some things out of her control and she has to let him go? And so because of that, because she lets him go and she lets him die, he's able to accomplish his mission, and then he's rewarded in the end by being brought back. So it was a message of what sacrifice means, but also what sacrifice can bring. And I also need Kirby in this next series to be with Angie and Hope. There's going to be, a recurrence of that. So for her, she felt like it was all just tied up too nicely, and there weren't any just heart-wrenching moments, where the sacrifice was real. I think the sacrifices were definitely real. The problem is, I also know my readership, and for most people, it's rough to watch a kid die, really, especially for me as a mother. And so I know that a lot of people were really happy that Kirby didn't actually lose his life. And so while on the one hand, when you up the stakes, you have to be ready to let people die, characters die, and not allow them to come back to life, because it almost seems like it defeated the purpose. I had definite reasons behind it, and I also know my audience. So I understand where she's coming from, but again, I disagree with that. So there were things that she said that I agreed with, things that I didn't agree with, because I know where I was coming writing this. I understand my readers, and the feedback that I got let me know that worked out quite a bit for them. So I really like this reviewer, even though she was pretty brutal. I'm really glad that she said all of these things, because one, it helps you understand different viewpoints. It also helps you understand what your readers really want. And this is a person who's never read anything of mine before. I don't know if she'll read anything more, but it's nice to see these different aspects of it. And there are things that I can obviously tweak in the 4th book that I'm actually excited to do, thinking about those possibilities. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. Now, obviously, it's going to be a project for a little bit later, because I'd have to go through and figure out where that would fit. And I've got other things that I'm working on. But I wasn't, you have to put on a thick skin, look at it from a business perspective. Don't get personal with it. Like, don't let your emotions and the way that you are attached to your product and what you've created blind you to its possible weaknesses, and that other people are seeing those with fresh eyes, and that's okay. Just recognize that in the process of writing, you're never going to be the best writer ever. You're never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to be learning. And I'm the first one to say and to admit that Lily, calm, that I'm not the best writer in the world. I know how to write well, and I understand all of the technical aspects of it, and the fundamentals of it, and the advanced methods of it, and then applying it, I understand that too. Shh, Lily, no more, stop that. But you're also developing your craft. You're working on your work in progress, but you're also working on your process and fixing things as you go and learning. And this is a good learning experience right here. This is a great way to consider, oh yeah, I really do need to focus more on the development between Ty and Hope. It can't just be, oh yay, they're together. How are they together now? Because we have built up all of these moments. How are they together? And maybe I should have put more scenes in there, and I'm inclined to agree with her on that. So, lest you just feel like, oh, I just can't handle all this criticism, I'm the worst writer ever, I want you to understand that even the best writers in the world, writers who we acknowledge are fabulous and wonderful, get critiqued. And so I want you to take a look at these, and maybe this will give you some hope so you're not down on yourself. Now, obviously, we don't know who these people are, but just recognize that these people have opinions and they're sharing them. So this is someone who reviewed the 4th book in the Harry Potter series. And so they said, I would have given this 5 stars if there is not this huge plot hole. Why does Harry have to be the winner of the Triwizard Tournament when Undercover Death Eater could have just given Harry a pot key at any one point in the year? Valid. That's a good question. Rowling continues to develop a great fantasy for YA. The world is a great combination of mundane and magical. Okay. The main character. Okay, the action is consistent in tone and description from the prior books. Harry is entered into the Triwizards Tournament by someone else to get him lured into dangerous situations. Note, this is a lame plot device for getting him to Voldemort. The test could have been a bit more difficult / interesting. The dragon task description is a bit thin for my taste, and the maze was clearly there just to get some Harry character development and move him to Voldemort. The confrontation in the graveyard was well done and helped to save a poor plot device. So I sit there and I think, well, that's kind of valid. I guess that pot key could have been given to him at any given moment. But again, there would have been so much loss. So maybe it was thin. Maybe that plot point was too thin for others, but it never once occurred to me. And I don't know that it occurred, I don't know how many people it occurred to, but obviously, J.K. Rowling is getting she gets amazing reviews, positive reviews, lots of people love it, but there are going to be people who are going to pick at things and find things, even writers who are well established as professionals, great, wonderful, they're going to get picked at. And I'm sure they're just able to brush it off and say, well. In fact, I remember an interview that J.K. Rowling did where she talked about how she feels like it was a mistake, that it might have been a mistake to put Ron and Hermione together, because it would have made more sense if if Hermione and Harry had ended up together. But she said that she didn't do that because it felt so obvious. It felt like the obvious choice. But now, in hindsight, sometimes she thinks that maybe she should have done that. So, I think it's great the way it is. I also think it would have been really interesting if Hermione and Harry had ended up together. What kind of twists would that have taken? And I honestly, I probably would have liked that more just because Ron's such a goofball, and I think Hermione and Harry would have been better matched. But those are subjective, that's an opinion. It's an opinion. So everybody, even authors who are well established, are going to look back on their books and think to themselves, well, I probably would have done that differently. They're going to find their own problems with their own books. But at the end of the day, you do the best you can. You continue to develop your craft, and you publish. You write and you publish. And there are going to be people who love it, and there are going to be people who find fault with it. And what you do is you decide where your intent was. You decide if there are enough people complaining about it. And if you're kind of on the fence and you're not sure, but there are enough people who are like, that's a problem, then fix it. Just fix it. There's no harm in that. If it's an opinion based on, I hated this person's personality, and only one or two people are saying that, then clearly that's a subjective opinion, and that type of personality rubs someone's personality the wrong way. So I wouldn't make massive changes to your books unless you have a lot of people saying the same thing, especially your editors and your beta readers. Then change things around, and also recognize that when you're looking at reviews, people are reading books during different times in their lives, different seasons in their lives. I've read books where I hated them and then come back to them later and I like them. And it's because I'm at a different place in my life. So I want you to recognize that for you just need to know what genre you're writing in, what those people in that readership are expecting from you. And as you build your platform, pay attention to how they're reacting to what you're writing and what they love about it, what they like about it. And then at the end of the day, just be very true to what you are trying to write and trying to put out there as well. So here's another one. I think this is for It. Is this Stephen King's? Yes. Okay, so here are a few negative things. I was drawn into the story quickly. The characters are interesting, and the use of shifting timelines kept the story flowing and mentally engaging. Pennywise is scary, evil, violent, and pretty much what you want him to be. The book's characters are complex, with well-explained backstories. The book is long, but in the end, didn't satisfy. The climactic final scenes did pull the story together, but required an acceptance of a plot device that strained credibility. I remember what drove me away from King's books. It seems he has a deep-seated and visceral dislike of the common man. So often his characters display a level of ignorance and racism uglier than anyone I've ever met. King's world is populated by bullies and corruption. There are no healthy relationships, and innocence is destroyed in a perverse and obscene way. So, someone has a real problem with all of the characters that he has. Now, this is going to be someone who, for him, this is a personal opinion. Other people like this and feel that this is normal, that this relates, that this makes sense. So you have to decide and understand what it is your readership is expecting. Okay. Now, Stephen King has had so many positive reviews for It because these true horror fans who like this gore, who like these kind of unhealthy relationships, who understand them, who recognize that this is part of horror, they don't have a problem with that. And so, but again, it's a criticism on his writing style, on what he did, on his characters and these unhealthy relationships. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has them, okay? And this is another person. The turtle was a disappointment for me as well. No real part of significance in the story, except a little during their first confrontation with it in the sewers. Otherwise, King hits at some unnamed godlike influence, giving it strength to the kids to fight on. I was also disappointed by how the love triangle between Ben, Beverly, and Bill took place. Yeah, Ben and Beverly end up together in the end, but it is sort of patched together at the end with no explanation of how or why they chose to be together after all that, especially since Bill cheats on Audrey with Beverly as an adult before confronting it for the last time. All of a sudden, the story tells you Beverly and Ben left Derry together as a couple. I think it is safe to say where King lacks in writing ability, which is the area of romance. Thank God horror worked out for him. I thought that was so Because I think we can all agree that Stephen King's not a romance writer. So I think it was funny that this person who probably reads romance as well had a real issue. Like, their problem with the book was that the romantic aspect of the book was underdeveloped. But most people who are hardcore horror fans and who don't really either don't care about romance or just recognize that in horror there's the focus is not going to be on romance, they're not going to have a problem with this. Again, this is a critique where Stephen King has to sit there, and I doubt he read this, honestly. Who has the time? He doesn't have time to do that. Where he sits there and he's focused on the horror of it. He's focused on a specific message that he's sending, and it isn't about the romance. And so if he were to read this, I'm sure he wouldn't care at all. And probably in, whatever book he writes in the future, he may or may not try to develop romance a little more. But again, know your audience. And for the most part, his readership is not concerned about the romance, I don't think, so much. I just thought that was really funny. And then this is Lord of the Rings. This is for Tolkien. I'm in no way am I minimizing his contribution to English literature, as I realize that his imagination is above reproach, his rhetoric impressive. However, I truly detest monotony, and this novel is laden with it. I trudged through the overly detailed descriptions of the geography. The characters seemed to languish during the prolonged events, and very little progress was made through the entire novel. Also, the ever-growing list of names for the same character or location was exhausting. I just can't understand why so many aliases were necessary, other than to create complete confusion. To some degree, I truly feel that the same effect could have been accomplished, even to adequately set the elaborate scene in 3/4 or less of its current length. When all is said and done, I cannot in good conscience rate this novel less than 3 stars. The impact of his work on literature, and as previously mentioned, his extraordinary imagination are priceless. Now, I want you to consider when Tolkien wrote this book. Nowadays we're all very much about instant gratification, and the pacing is faster with writing. There is not a lot of low tension, which there should never be low tension. But when Tolkien wrote that book, I don't think from what I recall, this was a project. This was a world he was developing, and I don't think he ever realized that it was going to be as big as it became. And if he had, perhaps it would have changed some of these things. But most people recognize that when they get into Tolkien and they're reading his books, this is just part of it. They're along for the ride, and there's going to be overly detailed descriptions of geography. In fact, it's one of the things that made it a little difficult for me to read the books. Although I really loved and enjoyed them, I did some skimming because I felt like, that doesn't have anything to do with the plot. That doesn't have anything to do with the plot. There was just a lot of setting and a lot of description that felt monotonous. But at the end of the day, it's Tolkien, man, and that you just have to know going into it that that's what you're going to get. And most people, because they love Tolkien and they just love what he accomplished, he basically introduced, fantasy for us on that front, that genre, and just his imagination and what he created and what was possible. And this person is doing a really good job of talking about that. Like, he recognizes that. But it's interesting because, again, this is a well-established book, English literature. It's been praised over and over again, but also there are going to be people who find fault with it, things that do not work for them. So I want you to understand what I'm getting at here as I ramble along and try to help you out here. What I'm getting to here is that every author imaginable, whether they've made it big or whether they're just starting out, is going to get critiqued. They're going to get negative reviews. They're going to get constructive criticism. It is your job to wear that thick skin and recognize that you cannot please everybody. Recognize that there's going to be constructive criticism that is valid, and you need to accept that. And that there are just going to be people who are trolling, For example, with Marry Your Billionaire, I got a 1-star review because there weren't any sex scenes, even though it clearly stated that it was a sweet and clean romance. I have no control over those who accidentally download my sweet and clean romance book thinking that there's going to be sex scenes. So clearly that's not a critique for me that I even care about. There weren't supposed to be sex scenes in that book. It was a sweet and clean romance novel. So I'm not worried about that. And that review is going to help me for anyone else who may make a mistake. They may see that review and go, oh, I need sex scenes, so I'm not going to read this book. Or they just may know and prepare themselves for the fact that it's going to be sweet and clean, and then their hopes aren't dashed when there's not anything in there. So you just need to recognize that A, it's subjective. It's subjective. B, you are still learning and you're still growing, and there's never going to be a point in your life where you can sit there and go, I am the best, most amazing, most wonderful writer ever. Nobody is better than me, because at the end of the day, there's so many fabulous writers and they're still improving their craft. Everyone is learning, everyone is growing. Practice, practice, practice. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm still getting there. You know, The Healer was a huge learning process for me. And I know for a fact that there are things that I can fix in that series. But you just keep building upon what you learn and what you know. And allow that constructive criticism to help you, but also recognize that if only a few people are giving you that and you do not feel like it really applies, just don't worry about it. It's an opinion, and they're entitled to it, and that's okay. And then if you feel like enough people are saying it and you feel like that is valid, then apply it and move on and learn something from it, because you're going to learn so much from getting that constructive criticism from everything that your editors give you. It's going to help you out and be one of the best learning experiences as you perfect your craft and your process. So I hope that was helpful for those of you who have had bad reviews or a lot of constructive criticism. I feel your pain. I understand it. These are your babies, and it's hard for people to tell you that they don't like something that you've worked so hard on. But there are going to be so many people who are going to love exactly what you've worked so hard on. So don't get discouraged, please. Don't get discouraged at all. And I hope by showing you that even the greats get nailed and ripped a new one a time or two, will help you and help you recognize that everybody's going to get critiqued no matter what. And everybody has an opinion about everything, no matter what. So hopefully this has inspired you and helped you and uplifted you. And if it has, please like it. Please subscribe if you're new to the family. Comment below if you have questions about anything, really, about writing, about handling constructive criticism. And I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.